In this lesson, we're going to talk about one of the fundamental constructs of computer science. These are called loops, and loops are very useful when we want to do the same kind of thing over and over and over and over and over again. And so the example I'm going to start with is, what if I told you I wanted you to output the numbers 1 all the way up to 10? One way to do it would be to do a whole bunch of system.out.print lines and basically copy, paste, and change all of these numbers, and you could go all the way up to 10, and when I run that, then sure, I'll get the desired result if I keep going to 10. But if I were to say go to 100, you could imagine that doing something where you go up to 100 would not be very fun and certainly not be very efficient. So a better way to do it is using what we call a loop that will repeat something over and over. What I want to do is I want to repeat a system.out.print line over and over and over again, but right here I want the number to vary. I want to vary something where it goes up by 1 every time. So this I'm about to write is called a for loop. And there are different kinds of loops that I'm going to show you, but this is a for loop. And so I'm going to write a loop. And in my for loop, I have 3 things separated by semicolons. The first is the initial condition. So initially, I'm going to have a variable called x, which is an integer. So I'm saying I'm going to make a variable called x, which is an integer, equal to 0 to start. This is called the initial condition. And then here, I'm going to put what I want to do, what's going to make the loop stop. In other words, x is going to start at 0, and we're going to continue to do this as long as x is less than, let's say, 10. Okay? Then here, we have what we want to happen to x every time we go through the loop. So if I type x plus plus, what that means, that's short form for I want x to go up by 1 every time. So I have 3 things. Initial condition. This is how long I'm going to continue the loop. So as soon as x gets to 10, I'm going to stop because 10 is not less than 10. Right? So as long as this is true, I'm going to continue the loop. And then this is what I want to happen to my variable x each time. This is saying I want it to go up by 1. And then here I'm going to put brackets. So anything I put between the brackets, anything that goes between here and here, is going to happen every single time I go through the loop. So if what I want to do is print out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, if I put x right there, watch what's going to happen. So I'll execute it, and I get 0 up to 9. Now you'll notice I don't get 10, and that's because as I go through this loop, I start at 0. So the way this would look is I start at 0, and it prints out 0, and then it goes back and loops through again, and it increases by 1, so now x is 1, it prints out 1. Then it loops back, increases it again, so now x is 2, it prints out 2, and it keeps going because x is still less than 10. So if we skip and get to 9, 9 is still less than 10, so it prints out 9, and then it goes back to here, increases, and now it's 10. Is 10 less than 10? No, it's not, so it won't do that last one, so we don't get the 10. If I were to put this to 11, like so, now I get the 10. Or the other way to do that is I can say less than or equal to 10. And if I were to run that, sure enough, I'll get the 10 again. Now, I don't have to have the x here. I could also do something like hello. And if I do that, then I'm just going to get hello 10 times. So I don't absolutely have to have the x value in here. And I can also use it in conjunction, where I could even do something like this, where I take the value of x and I glue on, say, like a period space. And I could have something like this, where I have 0 hello, 1 hello, 2 hello, and so on. You know, I can do all kinds of different things when I have a loop. Now let's just take that out, and we'll just put x to simplify. And now if I were to change this to x plus, so x plus plus is a special, we often increase a variable by 1, so it's a short form, but we can say something like x plus equals 2. And what that does is it makes x go up by 2 every time. So I get 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And I can put anything I want there. I could put a 3, and then I'll just get 0, 3, 6, 9. If I were to put a minus sign here and say I want x to go down by 2, what will happen is that I won't get, I get the infinite loop, because what happens is this will continue decreasing until x becomes greater than 10, which will never happen. So this is an infinite loop, which is not a good thing. It keeps going and going and going, and eventually it'll say it timed out, output limit reached. So we don't want to do that. But you can go down with your x value as well. So if I were to start, I can change the start value. I could change it to, say, 10 to start, and say I want to continue this loop as long as x is, say, greater than 0, and greater than or equal to 0, and I want x to go down by 1 every time. So that's just x minus minus. And if I run that, you can see I have countdown now from 10 to 0, because we start at 10, we continue the loop as long as x is greater than or equal to 0, and we go down by 1 every time. If I wanted to say 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, I change it to x minus equals 2, and that makes it go down by 2 every time. So I can use this loop to go up, and I can also use it to go down. So that's called a for loop. Now what I'm going to show you is called a while loop. So a while loop is a little different. What I do here is I start my variable outside the loop. So I'm going to start with a variable called x. I'm going to make it equal to 0. And I'm going to say while x is less than or equal to 10, I'm going to do something. And let's say I want to system.out.print line x, and then here x plus plus. So if I were to do something like this, you can see down here I get the same result that I had with the first for loop. So it's also a loop, just a different type. It's called a while loop. So I start x at 0, and then I say, okay, as long as x is less than or equal to 10, I'm going to keep doing something over and over and over again, and I increase x by 1 every time we go through the loop. So we still have our initial condition. We have what we need to happen in order to continue the loop, and then here we have what we want it to go up or down by. So it's very similar to a for loop, just slightly different format. And similar to a for loop, I can change this to say I want x to go up by 2, and then I get this kind of behavior. So very, very similar. And again, I always joke in class that if anyone's ever had to write lines as a punishment before, if they had computers at the time, if your teacher said, I want you to write 100 lines, you could do something like this, where you say, I won't be bad, and you just set your conditions, and all of a sudden you're done writing your lines, and then you can walk out and enjoy your recess. So now that we're getting a sense for kind of how we can use variables and scanners, and we can get user input and loops now, we can start putting things together. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to write a program where the user can write a loop or tell us to loop as much as they want. So I'm going to import the scanner class that we did in the last lesson. And then in here I'm going to create a scanner object. And don't forget, a scanner object allows us to actually get user input. So I make the object, and then I'm going to output to the screen how many loops would you like to run? Question mark. And then I'm going to get user input, and it's going to be an integer value. So I'm going to call it, let's call it num loops. So that's what I'm naming my variable, and that's going to be s.nextInt, because I'm getting an integer value from the user, like so. So I'm going to ask how many loops the user would like to run. They're going to type in a number, and that number is going to be stored right there. So what I can do is I can say, let's start our integer x at 0, and while x is less than num loops. And don't forget, that was what was defined by the user. And by the way, don't ever put a semicolon after your loop or it won't run. You want to continue on. You don't want to end the statement. And then here you type system.out.println. This is loop. And then I can put on the end the x like so. And x increases by 1 every time. So I'm going to put my input here of, let's say, 20. And if I run my program, it says how many loops would you like to run? This is loop 1, so it goes up to whatever the user put. Now I said 20, and to normal people, we don't start at 0, we start at 1. So I could put, I could start my x at 1, like so, and I could say go to x less than or equal to num loops, and then instead of going from 0 to 19, that will change it to go from 1 to 20. And one other thing I'll add while I'm here is that I noticed there's this button here that says interactive. So I don't have to put this standard input here. I can click the interactive button, and then when I run it, watch what happens. See how it's waiting for input from the user now? So I can put the 20 right here, enter, and then you can see it runs through the rest of the program. So that's just an option I noticed with JDoodle that you can have. Okay. So now we know loops, we know for loops, and we know while loops, and we have the ability to combine doing loops with getting input from the user, which is really powerful when you're doing computer programming.